Hello there. I am Robert McKay. The channel, as you saw, is Whiskey for Beginners. It is preeminently a thoroughly amateur production. I'm looking at my phone that's set up there. I'm sitting at the kitchen table. Yeah, the table's catching things. I'm sitting at the kitchen table. And this is the best setup I've ever had, which tells you something about the amateur status of this here operation. I was thinking tonight, and it occurred to me that in any number of videos I talk about nosing, and I talk about the palate, and I talk about the finish, and I talk about the nose of whiskey. And I've never done a video that explains these things. I have a video in the Whisky Basics series, and I'm putting this video in that series. I'm adding to it. It's been 36 videos for a few years now, 3 years, I think. And now it's going to be 37. I have a video in that series on how to taste whiskey, but I don't have one that explains these terms. And this being a channel aimed at people who are new to whiskey and don't know this stuff, maybe, that is a gap that I need to fill. When I first started this channel, somebody kind of looked down on it, said, that's just a niche you're filling. Well, yeah, I know that. But it's a niche that needs filling, I do believe. So, there's my glass. It's a Glencairn. I believe I have a video on the Glencairn glass. We pour whiskey there into. And this particular whiskey is Evan Williams Bottled in Bond Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. It's a kind of a plain Jane label. It's a plain Jane bottle. No cork. Screw top, and it's plastic. That's a plastic lid there. This bottle cost me $19.99, 20 bucks. I got it at Total Wine on the 17th of December of 2025. And it's down to this now on the 10th of March 2026. And I have had whiskey that costs double this price or more, that costs $40, $50. I've had whiskey that, if you can find it, you're liable to have to pay $100 that wasn't this good. Okay. Let me nose the whiskey. And it's an interesting thing about tasting whiskey. You don't palate it, you don't finish it, but you do nose it. And then you talk about the nose, the palate, and the finish. I suppose that, well, it might, the terminology for all I know, and I'm speculating here, but I think it's fairly sound speculation. It might have come out of the wine tasting world, which has been a little more sophisticated about things for a long time than whiskey, because until the 80s we did not even have our own whiskey tasting glass. And it really in the 80s is only when the basic idea for the Glencairn came along. It didn't go into production for several years after that, not until 2000 or thereabouts, as I recall. And so we've gotten, I propose, I suspect, at least some of our terminology from that wine world. Although wine is bafflingly complex. You got red wine, you got white wine, you got rosé, you got still wine, you got sparkling wine. And then within each of those categories, you got zillions of different grape varieties, wine varieties. I've thought about getting into wine, but it's just too complex for me. I got all I can do to understand whiskey. But we nose it. In other words, we sniff it, we smell it. And this is 100 proof, 50% alcohol by volume, if that's the terms in which you think. I think in terms of proof. I think in terms of fifths, quarts, pints, that kind of thing. I learned my terminology long before whiskey measurements went metric. Metric system makes a ton more sense, but it's a whole different language that I have not learned. And as I nose this, as I sniff it, I get various notes. In other words, I smell different things. There's definitely butterscotch and brown sugar in there. I'm not getting much alcohol, and that's why I mentioned the 100 proof. Half of what's in this glass is alcohol, and yet it's not a scorcher. Some, there's 90 proof whiskey that'll singe your nose hairs. No, I'm not getting a lot more, and this isn't a review, so I'm not going to push. But this is nosing whiskey. Use your nose to nose, and you detect the nose. Next, we don't palate the whiskey, we taste the whiskey. Typical bourbon notes, brown sugar, cinnamon, getting some honey in there. I'm not going to probe too deeply. This isn't a review. I'm explaining the terms of what I'm doing. But there's the mouthfeel, and I wish there was a better term. They ain't one. And I have tried to come up with one on my own, and mouthfeel, as awkward as it is the best one, because it's the feel of the whiskey in your mouth. The mouthfeel here is smooth. And that, when it comes to the mouthfeel, that's the only place I use that word smooth, because it seems to mean something different to everybody. Please, don't just, that's smooth. If it's the mouthfeel that's smooth, say the mouthfeel is smooth, because there we're dealing with texture, and smooth is a texture. But if it doesn't scorch you with alcohol, say that. If the various notes are not sharp and prickly, say that. Sometimes you can't be specific. I understand that. I run into that my own self. But be as specific as you can. Now, how do we taste? We do not palate the whiskey. How do we taste it? How do I taste it? You sip it. Good whiskey is sipping whiskey. And if you've never sipped whiskey, you've just slugged it down, then you have not appreciated the whiskey. And, you know, everybody starts somewhere. I didn't know all this stuff until 2021. I started learning in September of 2021. So I've not been at it too long. 4 years plus. I had to stop and think. This is 2026, but September 2025 was 4 years. And so if you don't know these things, that's perfectly fine. You're the one this channel and this video exists to help. But I move the whiskey around in my mouth. I take a sip. Now, which size sip works best for you, you can find out. You know, some people need a big sip. Some people can do with a small one. I'd say I take medium sips. But you move it around. Some people do what they call the Kentucky chew. They're actually chewing on the whiskey. And I know it's liquid, but their mouth is chewing. I just move it around. I don't swish it. I'm not trying to aerate it. But I move it gently around, get it on both sides of my mouth, front and back of my tongue, under my tongue. And it's amazing what you can detect if you don't just hold it right in the center of your tongue. There are no taste buds in your cheeks, but I swear I get flavors there on a fairly regular basis. So, on the palate, I get the honey, the brown sugar, the cinnamon, a little bit of oak. But I did not palate the whiskey, I tasted the whiskey. And now there's the finish. We nose the whiskey, but we don't palate the whiskey, and we don't finish the whiskey. A finished whiskey means something entirely different, and I'm not going to go into that there. I'm already, well, I'm not as far along as I thought it might be. I'm just coming up on 13 minutes. Maybe I'll finally keep a video brief. I'm getting oak, which is transforming into semi-sweet chocolate, dark chocolate. Yeah, dark chocolate. There's cinnamon, there's the brown sugar, there's a little bit of alcohol. Not sting even, it's not that strong, but I can feel the alcohol on my tongue. And the hug, in this case a Kentucky hug, started here and it's going on down. And that's the finish. A finish can be long, it can be short, it can be medium, it can taste nasty. I've found that generally the finish, if it's going to be different from the nose and the palate, is generally worse than the nose and the palate. Not necessarily bad. You know, if the nose and the palate are here, then the finish might be here. But genuinely bad would be way down here. So, you know, it's the example I use is a stock car race. You know, first place, yeah, that's the winner. But second place is not chopped liver. And out of a field of 43 cars, if you're coming in 10th, no, you're not the winner, but you are not bad. You're better than 33 other drivers in that field. And so when I say that generally the finish is worse than the nose and the palate, it might just be that much worse than absolutely superb. So, hopefully I have been kind of, sort of, almost nearly in the neighborhood of being close to clear. And everybody out there saying, yeah, you're clear all right. You're as clear as Mississippi mud. You can probably understand me about as well as you can see from the inside of a black cow at midnight in a thunderstorm. Us country folks, we come up with some interesting expressions. And I don't know about anybody else. I'm proud of being a hick. Anyway, you nose the whiskey to get the nose of the whiskey, but you do not palate or finish the whiskey to get the palate and the finish. You nose the whiskey, you smell the whiskey, you taste the whiskey, and through all this, you don't have to get what I get. You don't have to get what anybody else gets. And if all you can come up with after you diligently, honestly approach the whiskey, if all you can come up with is it smells like whiskey, it tastes like whiskey, that's fine. There are people far better experienced and knowledgeable than I am, who sometimes say, it smells like whiskey, or it tastes like whiskey. Time and practice will improve your abilities. You might reach a point at which you can't improve anymore. Not all of us can run as fast as Usain Bolt, but with practice, we can run faster than we can when we start. You know, however it is to you, that's what you're getting. And you don't have to imitate or be just like any of the rest of us. So, I set that aside. I lift my glass and say, cheers.